For years, my wife and I had a seemingly perfect marriage. We shared a home, financial responsibilities, and had plans for the future. But little by little, I started noticing changes in her behavior. Small things that didn't add up. She became more distant, guarded, and secretive with her phone. She'd take calls in another room, leaving me wondering what was going on. Initially, I brushed it off. People go through phases, right? She was stressed with work, maybe she had new friends, but the nagging feeling wouldn't leave. I had always prided myself on being a trusting husband, but now, every little detail felt suspicious. Then, one night, it happened. I was sitting in our living room when I overheard her on the phone. Her voice was different, too calm and too conspiratorial. She was speaking to someone named James. I couldn't hear every word, but enough snippets reached me to send a chill down my spine. She was saying something about being pregnant, about blaming the child on me, and about getting rid of me for financial gain. She even mentioned insurance money and survivor benefits. My heart raced as I realized what was happening. I felt like I was in some twisted nightmare. The woman I had loved and trusted for so long was plotting my death. She was planning to have me killed for the money, and worse, she was going to frame me as the father of a child that wasn't even mine. This wasn't just cheating. It was betrayal at a level I never imagined possible. The shock hit me hard, but I knew I had to act fast. She had no idea I'd overheard her, and I couldn't just confront her. I needed concrete proof of her plan if I was going to stop her and protect myself. That's when I decided to secretly record the conversation. Little did she know, this recording would be the very thing that saved my life and exposed her for who she truly was. After overhearing that chilling conversation, I realized how deeply my wife had betrayed me. But confronting her directly without proof would be foolish. If I gave her any inkling that I knew, she might have altered her plans, and I'd be left with nothing to show for my suspicions. I needed to gather irrefutable evidence, something that would be difficult for her to deny. The next few days were a blur. I pretended everything was normal, went about my usual routine, all while my mind raced with thoughts of how I could expose her. She, meanwhile, continued with her normal life, until that fateful evening when she again picked up the phone to speak with James. I took a deep breath and, with my heart pounding, decided to record their conversation. It wasn't easy. I had to be stealthy, careful not to make a sound. I had no idea how this would play out, but in that moment, I knew I was taking the first step toward bringing her to justice. The conversation was even worse than I had imagined. She reassured James that he didn't need to worry about the details of the murder plan. She would make it look like an accident and manipulate the situation so she could collect all of the life insurance benefits. The call revealed just how calculating and cold she was. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment, it was a well-thought-out plot to murder me. I could feel my blood boil as I listened, but I knew I had the power to change everything. I kept the recording safe and began to plan my next steps. The truth was, I was no longer in a marriage with a person I loved and trusted. I was in a game of survival, and I needed to outsmart her before it was too late. After getting the recording, I knew I couldn't wait much longer. Her lover, James, was coming over the next day to follow through with the plan. This was it, the moment I would either confront her or lose everything. I wasn't sure if she would go through with it, but the fact that she'd gone so far to make plans with James left me no choice but to act. The morning arrived, and I stayed in the house, my nerves fraying as I waited for James to show up. When he did, it wasn't the confrontation I had imagined. He wasn't a raging madman or someone who had second thoughts. He was calm and collected. He was here to do business, and it was all too clear that my wife had already set everything in motion. He wasn't even trying to hide his intentions. He was trespassing on my property, ready to kill me for her. At that moment, I did what I had to do. I called the police. It was risky, but I knew it was the only way to protect myself. There was no telling what would happen next, but I couldn't let this man do to me what my wife had planned. The police arrived quickly, and the situation escalated. James was arrested for trespassing, but I had more than just his illegal entry to hold against him. I had the recording of my wife's plot, evidence of their conspiracy. He didn't try to deny it when the police questioned him. He knew the jig was up. The moment was surreal. It felt like everything was moving in slow motion, but I was oddly calm. The recording I had of my wife was all I needed to make sure the truth came out. As the police led James away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The nightmare wasn't over, but the first part was. The next few weeks were a blur. My wife was still in the dark, thinking she was in control, but I knew everything. I had the upper hand now, and I wasn't going to let her get away with what she had planned. But I had to be careful. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife anymore. I was facing a criminal conspiracy. I took the recording to a lawyer, and they were shocked by the evidence I presented. The plot was clear. She wanted me dead for financial gain, and she was willing to use her pregnancy as a cover-up. The recording was more than just a confession. It was proof that she had planned everything meticulously, including the involvement of James in the plot. With the help of my attorney, we built a case against my wife. We contacted the authorities, provided them with the evidence, and ensured that everything was in place for a trial. My wife had no idea what was coming. I kept up the facade of being the oblivious husband, still in the dark about her schemes. But inside, I was preparing for the worst. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. I never imagined that my life would come to this. Sitting in a courtroom, listening to the details of my wife's plot to murder me. The prosecution played the recording for the jury, and the room went silent. It was as if everyone in the room was collectively processing the depth of her betrayal. She had no way out. The evidence was irrefutable. Her lover had been caught on my property, and her own words had condemned her. In the end, the jury convicted her, and she was sentenced to prison for her role in the plot. Throughout the entire ordeal, one of the hardest parts to cope with was the emotional toll. I never imagined that the woman I had married, the person I had trusted more than anyone else, could turn on me so ruthlessly. The emotional impact of her betrayal was far more devastating than I ever anticipated. I spent years building a life with my wife, creating memories and plans for the future. The idea that she could plan my death for money was beyond comprehension. I felt like a fool for not seeing the signs earlier, but the truth was, I had been blindsided. I had been so sure of our relationship that I hadn't noticed the cracks forming beneath the surface. In the months following the trial, I had to rebuild my life from the ground up. I faced feelings of anger, sadness, and confusion. How could someone who had sworn to love me forever betray me so completely? How had I been so blind to the deception? The pain didn't end when she was sentenced. The betrayal lingered, haunting me in quiet moments. I found myself questioning everything: my judgment, my relationships, even my sense of self-worth. Could I trust anyone again? Would I ever be able to love without fear? But over time, I realized that I couldn't let this define me. I could take back control of my life, piece by piece. I learned to lean on friends and family for support, and I took time to focus on my own healing. The emotional scars would take time to heal, but I knew that I would emerge stronger from this. I had survived the worst betrayal of my life, and now I had the chance to rebuild, step by step. It was difficult to wrap my mind around the fact that my own wife was plotting to end my life for financial gain. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how sinister her plan really was. It wasn't just about an affair. It was a full-blown conspiracy to murder me, all so she could pocket my life insurance and survivor benefits. The more I analyzed the conversation I had overheard, the more details I uncovered about how calculated and meticulous she had been in her plotting. The phone call made it clear. She had already made arrangements. She was planning on telling everyone that the child she was carrying was mine, even though I knew it wasn't. The fake pregnancy was just a part of her deception. She planned to collect the life insurance and survivor benefits by framing me as the loving, unsuspecting husband. She was going to kill me, blame it on an accident, and move forward with her life, all while taking my money to start fresh with her lover, James. The realization that I could have easily been walking into a trap, possibly even unaware, was terrifying. How close had I been to dying? If I hadn't overheard her phone conversation, if I hadn't acted fast, would I have been the victim of a crime I never saw coming? There was no way to know for sure, but I couldn't ignore the fact that my life was at risk. The worst part was that it seemed so calculated. It wasn't an impulse decision on her part. It was a step-by-step plan. She had thought of everything, from how she would get rid of me to how she would cover up her tracks afterward. The sheer coldness of it left me numb, but it also filled me with a burning need to make sure she was stopped before she could hurt anyone else. If it hadn't been for my quick thinking and the evidence I had gathered, I may not have lived to tell the tale. I was lucky, but it wasn't just luck that saved me. It was the steps I took to ensure my survival, starting with the recording and then getting the police involved. Without those actions, there's no telling what would have happened next. The legal process that followed felt like an endless whirlwind of emotion and confusion. I had already experienced the shock and betrayal of discovering my wife's plans, but now I had to face the reality of what came next. Court. My wife, once the love of my life, was now my enemy, and the system would be the only way to ensure justice. I knew I needed to present the evidence I had carefully gathered, namely the recorded conversation, to make sure she was held accountable for her actions. But as I prepared for the trial, I couldn't help but wonder, would it be enough? Would the jury believe my story? After all, no one could be as cold and calculating as she was. Yet, there was no denying what had been recorded. Her words were clear, and her intentions were undeniable. The day of the trial was one of the most surreal days of my life. I sat in the courtroom, barely able to concentrate as I waited for the moment when the recording would be played for everyone to hear. I watched her sit across from me, her eyes full of contempt, and I couldn't help but feel a mixture of anger and sadness. She was so far gone, so consumed by her desire for money, that she was willing to destroy the life we had built together. When the recording played, the room fell silent. The gravity of the situation settled in for everyone in the room. It was as if the world had stopped moving. There was no denying the evidence. Her voice was crystal clear, and her plan was set out in excruciating detail. The police had already arrested James for trespassing, and the facts all lined up. She couldn't escape the truth. After a tense period of deliberation, the jury convicted her. I still remember the finality of the verdict. She had planned to kill me, and the evidence left no room for doubt. The sentencing was swift, and she was sent to prison for her role in the conspiracy. While the relief of knowing she would be held accountable for her actions was immense, it was also bittersweet. My wife, the woman I had once loved, was gone from my life forever. The emotional devastation that followed this revelation was overwhelming. I thought I had known my wife. I thought I had understood her, but this experience shattered everything I knew about our relationship. When you marry someone, you expect loyalty, trust, and honesty. You never expect them to plot your death for money. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that someone I had trusted completely was willing to take everything away from me for personal gain. I spent countless nights lying awake, replaying everything in my head. Had I missed the signs? Had I been blind to the person she really was? I thought back to all the small moments where I had noticed things were off, but I brushed them aside. Now, looking back, it was hard to believe I hadn't seen what was right in front of me. It was a painful, humbling experience to realize that someone who had vowed to love and cherish me could be capable of such cruelty. The emotional toll of the betrayal lingered long after the trial ended. I felt like I was walking through a fog, unsure of what to believe. The woman I had shared my life with, the woman I had built a future with, had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. It was as if the ground had been ripped out from under me, and I was left to pick up the pieces. But I also knew I couldn't let this define me. Yes, I had been betrayed. And yes, the hurt was immense. But I had survived, and that meant I had a chance to rebuild. The truth had come to light. And now it was time to heal, to move forward, and to rebuild my life from the ashes of this betrayal. I wouldn't let it destroy me. As I processed everything that had happened, I began to understand just how much this experience had taught me. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about trusting my instincts, being more cautious, and knowing that sometimes the people closest to you can hide the darkest secrets. It was a wake-up call about the complexities of relationships, trust, and self-preservation. Before this happened, I had always thought I could trust my partner with anything. I had believed in the idea of love and loyalty, convinced that those qualities were the foundation of any successful relationship. But now, I had learned the hard way that trust isn't something you should give freely. It's something that has to be earned and maintained. My wife had taken advantage of my trust in ways I could never have imagined. This experience taught me that self-care is crucial. In the aftermath, I had to focus on my own mental and emotional well-being. I had to make sure that I was okay before I could even begin to think about rebuilding any other aspect of my life. I surrounded myself with supportive friends and family members who helped me through the worst moments. They were there to remind me that I was more than this betrayal, that I was capable of healing and moving forward. Another valuable lesson I learned was the importance of being vigilant and not ignoring my instincts. I had suspected something was off, but I hadn't acted on it quickly enough. I learned that when you feel something is wrong, it's important to trust that feeling and take action before it's too late. It was a painful lesson, but it was one that would stay with me for the rest of my life. Looking back on everything, I can see how much this entire experience has shaped me. The legal victory, the emotional devastation, and the lessons learned have all combined to make me a stronger person. The verdict in court was just the beginning of my healing process, but it wasn't the end of the journey. I had to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and take control of my future. But I also wanted to share my story to help others who might be going through something similar. This experience taught me that trust is sacred. You cannot let anyone take advantage of your loyalty or manipulate your feelings for their own gain. If you're in a relationship, don't ignore the red flags. If something feels wrong, investigate it, and don't be afraid to confront the truth. It might be difficult, but knowing the truth is always better than living in the dark. Most importantly, I want others to understand that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It's painful, and it takes time to heal, but you can come out the other side stronger and wiser. Life doesn't always go as planned, and sometimes people you thought you could trust will let you down in the most unimaginable ways. But you have the power to rebuild your life, to regain your strength, and to move forward in a way that is healthier and more empowering. My story is a warning, but it's also a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Even after everything that happened, I survived, and I'm still here. And so are you. If you've been betrayed, remember, you have the power to overcome it. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so and press the notification bell. This way, you'll stay updated with more shocking real-life stories.